Welcome to the Intentional Leader Podcast presented by Reenergize Professional Coaching. We appreciate you listening in and learning with us. The stories and leadership tips you hear will help you become a great leader. Listen intentionally. Now, to our host, Sean Olson.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 28 of the Intentional Leader Podcast. This is the podcast where you hear the real stories of normal people just like you who have become extraordinary leaders. You'll learn some valuable lessons from their lives, lessons you can apply to become the best leader that you were created to be. When you become an intentional leader, lives are changed. I'm your host, Sean Olson. I'm an executive coach, business owner, author, and speaker. Thank you for joining us today. It is my privilege to introduce our guest for today, Tyler Foley. Tyler is the managing director of Total Buy-In, and he is the author of the #1 best-selling book. You ready for this, folks? The Power to Speak Naked. Tyler, welcome to the Intentional Leader Podcast. Great to see you today.
Oh, it's a pleasure, as always, Sean, to have our conversations. I'm looking forward to this one.
Absolutely. So, Tyler, as you're aware, at the Intentional Leader Podcast, we begin every episode with our guests just kind of telling their story, their progression through their professional career, but even more importantly, leadership lessons learned along the way. So tell us about you. Full name, Sean Tyler Foley, spelled the same as me. So we had that in common, a great place to go. Tyler, tell us about your journey, what you've learned in leadership.
I have had a lot of leadership lessons in life, both from leadership role and from roles of seeing incredible leaders in action. My father passed away when I was 6 years old. And as tragic as that was, I had the privilege of then having a community come together to raise me. So I didn't just have one father figure. I had several, at least a dozen very thoughtful men, very powerful men, very smart men,
Nice.
leaders within my community who came together to help raise me and be there for me. And so I've learned the leadership lessons from a very early age from incredible human beings who stepped up to help guide me in my life. And then, when my father passed away, one of the things that I got involved with very quickly was professional acting, first on stage and then in film and television. And so I got to see leadership firsthand, good leadership and bad leadership from the directors that I would work with, and styles that really mattered. And when you get into a business very early on in your life, you tend to retire very early on in your life. So I retired at 25 and went back to school and got an engineering discipline under my belt. And when I started my first business, I started it with an incredible mentor and businesswoman. And unfortunately, she passed away very early on in that venture. We were only 3 years into it when she passed away. And then I got to work with other great leaders who helped me pick up the pieces afterwards. So I would say that, some of the best leadership skills and leadership advice that I've learned is learn from people who are doing it at a higher level than you and replicate the things that are working for them and work for you, and then innovate your own path for the things that they haven't quite solved.
So a lot of our listeners hear about actors and acting and directors, and we hear good and bad and otherwise. You've been there, done that, and we'll have a link to your profile and stuff like that where people can see some stuff you've been in. On that front, just give us quick stories. Best leadership you saw from a director as a kid, worst leadership you saw from a director, just the traits.
The best leadership that I ever saw was a director I'm still actually in contact with. I went to a fine arts high school, and it was kind of like Fame, only not in New York. It was in Okotoks, Alberta, Canada. And the director, Jim, was very, very smart, And in fact, I think he actually has a degree in psychology. And his understanding, first of all, they talk about good leaders having a good emotional IQ, right?
Mm-hmm.
High in, emotional intelligence. And Jim's EI was through the roof. He really had um, a pulse on where all of us were at as performers, as students, as human individuals. His ability to cast because of that was really good because he understood um, interpersonal dynamics. And again, having a psychology degree probably helped him a lot too. So he had a Bachelor of Fine Arts and then the psychology degree. And so he challenged you and gave really good direction, like technical direction. Like if you needed to, in theater, it's called blocking, where you have to move someplace.
Okay.
But he would only tell somebody to move if it served a purpose. Otherwise, you had the freedom to explore. He also had a really good ability to give very clear metrics and direction of the end goal. Like what was the purpose? Why were we together? And he created an amazing culture. So like there was, it was almost cultish in its indoctrination. And I think that, for good reason, cults get a bad name, but when you are building an organization, you need to have a little bit of the psychology of a cult behind it. Like you need people to buy into the culture that you are trying to put together. And he did an incredible job of creating this community. I am still in touch with at least 25 of the performers that I worked with in my teens. And we're talking 14, 15, 16, 17 when I was in the main stage program. I am now coming up on my 45th birthday. We had our 25-year reunion a few years ago from my graduating class. And it was an easy thing to do. It wasn't awkward. It wasn't weird. We knew everybody. We're like, oh, hey, yeah, no. And we're getting together Tuesday, right? Yeah, okay. Yeah. Like, I am still very close with a lot of the people that I went through. And that is a testament to the leadership that Jim put together. Like he led that program and led it for many, many, many years. And when he left the school, the program collapsed. So I think that is a testament to his leadership as well. It took them almost another 15 years before they got somebody back in who led the program back to the quality that it was in the early and late 90s when I was involved with it.
Great lessons there about the emotional intelligence and creating that culture where people not only are drawn in, but they're drawn to one another, and it carries on today. So give us a horror story from a director.
Oh, from a director, no names.
No names.
But I remember working on a very low budget film, and it was chaotic. It was absolute chaos. Nobody knew what they were doing. The script was constantly being rewritten. There were a lot of cooks in the kitchen, and the director didn't have a good handle on it. And I think the director had bitten off more than they could chew. Didn't have a clear direction of what they wanted the film to be. And it was just like, I remember showing up to set and, we get a call sheet and it says, these are the things that you're going to film that day. And you would study your lines based on the sides or the little bit of script that was tacked to the back of it. And I remember the fourth or fifth day of shooting, realizing that memorizing my signs was pointless because not only was the script going to change, but the film order was going to change. They were going to shoot different scenes, and we would be literally getting fresh printed blue copy, yellow copy, orange copy, magenta copy, white. Like it was just, it's funny with a script. because with every new revision, they change the color of the copy.
Mm.
I've never, ever, ever, ever before or since had because I keep everything in a binder to try to keep everything in order. Such a rainbow script. Like it was every color of paper you could possibly imagine was shoved into this binder. It was chaotic. And so one of the things that I learned from that was like, you need to have a clear vision and a clear direction, because you need to be able to communicate that vision and direction to the people you are marshaling to get them on. Because like if you don't know where you're going, forget the analogy of a rowboat and everybody rowing together. We were in those, on the ponds, they have those swan boats with the pedals.
Yes.
So I felt like we were 50 swan boats all tied together at the tail, and we were all paddling frantically away from one another, just trying to find our own way. And whoever was paddling the hardest was the one that was going to guide the direction of the mass for that moment. Not even that day, just that moment. And then somebody would tire, and then somebody else would take over. And it was chaotic. So with if you don't have a clear vision and a clear direction, if you can't very succinctly in one or two words even communicate your vision, you will not succeed.
I love the picture of those boats though, because it's the opposite of alignment, right? You've seen that where there's arrows going everywhere versus that large arrow where we're all going the same direction, and it definitely plays in. So, well, you talked about when you got out of that, you opened up a business with a partner, and unfortunately she passed. What industry were you in there?
Totally different than what I was doing before. So I got my engineering background is in civil engineering, and specifically in geomatics, which is earth study. And I specialized in photogrammetry. So for anybody who's ever turned on satellite view on Google Maps, there is no 3D in those, right? Like it's just a 2D picture. And it's actually a very complex technical process to make it happen, called photogrammetry. And that was what we specialized in, and then moved into, we had aerial photography, and then we did digital elevation models that we pulled from that imagery. And then eventually we moved into LiDAR. And at the very end, we were starting to get into mobile interior mapping. So now, right now, this year, your realtor can probably call somebody, and for a couple $100, they will come in and they will scan the inside of your house and do the really cool like walkthroughs and everything. In 2004, that was a remarkably hard process to do, and we were first company in Canada and one of 3 in North America to do it. And our cart, just the cart alone, just to be able to go in and have these lasers come and scan the rooms and then take the pictures at the same time, and be able to 3D positionally drop your house into Google so that it knew where you were, was a lot. Ours was $1.5 million. It had an IMU, or inertial measurement unit, in it that was so precise that it was the same IMU that they used in the Scud missiles, so that a Scud missile could find the bunker and like go through it. The problem with that, because it was an IMU that was so precise and could be put into a Scud missile and guide it to a bunker, we had to get top secret clearance just to have this piece of equipment, and we had to get it from both the US and Canada, because I operate in Canada. So I went through a lot, actually, to be able to do that. And that was kind of the business. We had a fleet of 3 planes, and they would run and do the aerial photography. And then we got this cart, and we would push it around on the inside of buildings and map it.
Wow. So that comes to an abrupt end, unfortunately, because of tragedy. So how did you pick up the pieces? Where'd you go next?
I'm lucky. I surround myself with people who are very caring, always have. As we discussed, it takes a village to raise people. And I think one of the things that people forget is that we're constantly growing, so we're constantly being raised. So I am always surrounding myself with people who I care for and care back for me. And one of my friends, Matt, um, owns a business with his father, who is another incredible leader. If I could give a shout out to Eric McLean right now, who is one of the best employers I've ever worked with. I've been very blessed. I've had very good employers when I have decided to be employed, because I have been self-employed 3/4 of my life. Um, so it's 30 of my 40 working years. I've done it on my own. But for the decade, cumulatively, where I have either worked with somebody or worked for somebody, I've had really, really good leadership. And Eric and Matt were two incredible people. And Matt was my best man at my wedding. And so when my business collapsed literally overnight, like I had a business one night, and then, my partner wasn't feeling good on a Friday. She went into the hospital and then never came out of the hospital. She passed away on the Sunday. And we didn't have the right director's insurance in place, and planes and lasers are expensive. And I had no way of recouping it. And that I had invested literally everything, my time, my money, my energy, my life. My wife and I picked the condo that we were living in because it was 2 blocks away from the office and the airstrip. It really impacted my life, and I wanted to crawl into a hole and die myself. And Matt came along and he was like, listen, I don't know if you know this, but you have a couple of skills that would make you a really good safety officer. And what's funny is for the business that I was running, the mapping firm, your primary clients when you're doing that kind of work are the government and oil and gas, both of which will always insist that you have a safety program in place.
Absolutely.
And so I had to go and get the training to do this safety program. And Matt came to me. He's like, listen, you've got what they refer to as a core, a certificate of recognition for your business, which means you have XYZ training. If you take these 3 or 4 extra classes, you will have your National Construction Safety Officer designation. I will pay for that. I need a safety manager for a project that I have up north in the oil sands. We're building a large structure up there. We've been contracted to do the electrical work for it. I will pay for you to do these courses. You get your designation. I'll give you a job. It'll work. And it just worked out. And he saw something in me that I didn't see. He also, again, very smart business mind, somebody who knows the resources that are there, can marshal people, can give them direction, and in a kind and loving way too, right? And it gave me a purpose and something to do. And then what's funny is I fell into this career and I love it. And although I don't work for Matt and Eric anymore because it was only going to be a contract position while they were building that while they were involved in that project, multi-billion-dollar project, infrastructure, but which was great for the resume. I have continued on with the safety because he was right. I really did fall in love with it, and I'm good at it. And I understood a lot of safety from the work that I was doing in film and television, particularly when I got into my early 20s. I started moving into stunt work, and a lot of what I have known from safety, I actually learned in stunt work before I realized that it was part of safety.
Yeah. Part of what I love about that story, though, thanks for sharing that. Thanks for being vulnerable with some difficult things. Part of what I love about that is obviously you had good relationships with people. So Matt already knew you and such, but most of us and listeners, we've all had those tragic events. It may not be the death of someone. It may be getting fired, maybe a divorce, whatever the case is. And when tragedy hits and people try to come alongside of us, so many of us reject it, right? And I think about your story where Matt comes alongside and he's like, hey, I see something in you for this industry. I need you to take some courses and stuff. It would have been just as easy to say, I'm not going there. I don't want to learn something new. And so part of that story that I love is not only that Matt came alongside and said, I see something and paved the way, but you were humble enough to accept it. Because I really see that a lot of people in their careers, they elevate because they're open to other people having a part to play.
Yeah, growth comes outside of your comfort zone for sure. And I, you know, I've been in contraction modes. I know what it feels like. I knew how easily it would have been for me to slip into a depression, especially because one of the reasons why I had retired from acting was I'd become really complacent with it. The work was starting to slow down for me after, I had, if you ever go to and look at my IMDb page, Internet Movie Database, you can see I was really, really, really active from about 2001 to 2004. And just the work started slowing down, and I had lost satisfaction in it. It was great because, for a long time it was play. It was fun. And, find something that you love, you'll never work a day in your life. Well, that's what I thought acting was going to be. But eventually it became a job, and the hustle and the grind of going to auditions. And I was lucky because I was a working actor. I didn't need to do anything else but perform. And in fact, even like when I went and got a real job after retiring from acting, I never earned as much as I did in acting for almost a decade.
Wow.
Like,
Wow.
it was a long, long while. In fact, Matt's job was the first one where I, got a tax slip and remitted my taxes, where I claimed that I made more money in a year than I did from acting. And so it was, it was a part of me where I knew what that depression felt like. Because when I started to not work very regularly in performing, especially when a lot of your self-worth is tied to somebody else's opinion of your perform, which was one of the greatest lessons that I learned too, because I've worked on both sides of the camera. And that was probably one of the smartest things that I ever did as an actor, was work as a reader, as a casting assistant, as a director. Your talent has nothing to do with you booking the job. And I think that it's important for people who are doing anything, whether that is, going on a job interview or looking for a promotion or starting their own company and they're looking for capital. The fact that you are in the room proves that you have the talent, or you have the skill set to be there, because you are in consideration. Getting the job has 1,000 factors outside of your talent and your skill. And that was a lesson that I had to really, I had to learn a few times before it really stuck. Because a lot, especially when you're putting your all into these performances and you're creating these characters, and then somebody else gets it. And, well, wasn't I good enough? Well, it had nothing to do with it. I remember being a reader in for a project that was being cast, and you get to read with all of these different performers, and this actor had come in to read for the lead role, female role, and she was phenomenal. Because I've been reading with probably 100 different people, and probably 15 or 20 for this role, and she came in, and it was first of all an instant chemistry. Like, that scene just flowed. She knew her lines. I had been reading so long that I knew all the lines, so we just performed the scene. And I remember at the end of it, I had goosebumps. And I remember turning to the casting director, and she was like, wow. And we looked over at the producer, and he was like, wow. And then we looked over at the director, and he was just kind of marking on his thing. And he goes, okay, next. And we're like, so that's her, right? And he goes, no, she reminds me of my ex, and then just scratched it off.
Yeah.
She didn't get the role. And I know the actress who did get the role, and she's good. She wasn't that good.
Yeah.
She got the role because she was basically second best, but the best reminded the director of his ex, and he didn't want to work with her.
Yeah, but there's some great leadership lessons in that stuff though, Tyler, and I appreciate that story, because when people are going for a promotion or applying for a new job, whatever the case is, no devastates people. But
Mhm.
what we have to realize is oftentimes we're actually being probably saved from a difficult scenario, right? So, like, if you're not ready for that position, you might think you're ready. They don't. Had they given it to you, you might have failed. And
Mhm.
that would have been worse than not getting the position. Or if it's, that role, maybe that wasn't the right role for where she needed to go or where you needed to go. And so having that mindset that no doesn't mean no, no means not this, and
Yeah.
maybe even just not this right now. So,
Well, and actually, you bring up a good point, because the funny thing about that movie is then it was stalled in production hiatus for almost 4.5 years.
wow.
So we did the casting thing, and then it didn't go anywhere. And so, like, that other actress was freed up to go and do some of the other work.
Yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, and Tony Robbins says it incredibly well. Life happens for you, not to you.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And every no is a yes somewhere else. Like, they're so, and it's funny because, to some people it's a little frou-frou, a little woo-woo, a little out there, but I have seen it time and time and time again that the opportunities that are supposed to come to you will,
Yeah.
and they will represent themselves if you're not catching that lesson. And I know that from both sides of it, where I'll try to pursue a thing and I'll be running this way and I'll just keep getting knocked down.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yep.
but I want this. And the
Exactly.
universe is like, that's not for you, kid. Stop it. And then the things that I'm kind of ignoring, a lot of times I'm getting knocked down straight into this door. I'm trying to go
Yeah.
through this one and I keep getting smashed over to this one. Then you
It's
walk through that door, and all of a sudden it's a hallway to the best life that you're ever going to lead. So,
absolutely. So I want to hit some of your story just so we can move past it because I want to get to your book. I know that you learned all the safety from Matt, and I think you said the other guy's name was Eric and stuff.
yeah,
And so you're managing director today of Total Buy-In, which is what industry?
it's a safety consulting industry. So,
Exactly.
yeah, and it's a great gig, and I love it. And I've got a
Paved
great
the way
team
for it.
that I work with too. And that's the nice thing, is now I've been able to take all of these leadership skills that I've learned from incredible leaders over years and years and years and years, and try to replicate those things for my team. And I'm very blessed that I've had a good core group that have stuck with me even through COVID. And that was probably one of the biggest challenges for me as a leader, is making sure that my people were taken care of.
Yep.
Sometimes to my own detriment, because there was a good 6 to 9 months there where I was paying other people and I wasn't
Mm.
getting a paycheck at all. I don't know that they knew that, and I don't know that they need to know that, but I
Right.
needed to make sure that they were taken care of, because if somebody's going to invest 110% into me, I'm going to invest 110% into them.
Yeah.
And I think that's the only way to really have a good solid core within your organization. The nice thing is now I poke my head in. Like, most of my revenue for me that Tyler takes in, it comes from the speaking and the book and some of the passive income streams that have been set up. But my active input ones are the public speaking and the safety consulting. I have a really good team of auditors and program developers who I poke my head in once a quarter. I'm like, how are we doing? And they're like, good,
Yep.
now go away. And I'm like, okay. And
So the classic.
if I need
Yeah.
to do any kind of course correction, it's just hey, can we try this? And they're like, okay. And then off we go.
Yeah. So that's the definition of that old phrase, that the best leaders work themselves out of a job. Congrats. You've done it. Right.
Thank you.
So that's there. So let's dive in. So you wrote this book, The Power to Speak Naked, obviously a catchy title that's going to get people's attention. And you speak a lot right now. I know our listeners, most people would list as like one of their top 10 fears in life of being public speaking.
Mhm.
So what drove you to write the book, and kind of dive into a little bit about the premise of it and your view about public speaking and why people are afraid of it?
I wrote the book because, as you pointed out, I think one of the statistics, and the numbers vary depending on the poll and the study that's done, but on average, 70% of Americans or North Americans or the world will claim that public speaking, they have anxiety around public speaking. And when they rank it, public speaking comes in above the fear of death. More people are afraid of public speaking than they
Wow.
are of dying. And I kept reading that stat going, that can't be true. And I wrote the book because it's not. That is not actually the case. People are not actually afraid of public speaking. If we were afraid of public speaking, commerce as we know it would collapse. And I can prove this by asking everyone in the audience to think of when was the last time you were at a restaurant. And if you were able to order food in a restaurant, you are not afraid of public speaking. And you're not, if you didn't know your wait staff, you aren't afraid of speaking to strangers either. So this notion that we're afraid to speak in public, or we're afraid to speak to strangers, or we're afraid to ask for what we want is null and void if you've ever been to a restaurant, ordered food, and got it delivered to your table. Because you were speaking in public, you were speaking to a stranger, and you asked for what you want, and it came.
Makes sense.
The reality is, and I know it because I can hear the objections over the internet, Sean. I can hear the wheels grinding and the audience screaming, but nobody's looking at me when I'm in a restaurant.
Right.
And if that is your rationale, then you need to acknowledge that you're not afraid of public speaking. You got to quit saying that right now because it's a false narrative. What you're afraid of is public judgment. And my book is designed to help people get over the fear of public judgment, not the fear of public speaking. That's why it's called The Power to Speak Naked, because our biggest fear is standing up completely nude, completely raw, where people can see the true, authentic us. And if that's really genuinely what we're afraid of, that's an easy thing to solve, because the true, raw, real, naked you is the best version of you. The stripped down version of you is the one that the audience is going to identify the most with.
Yeah.
And so the book is just a straight deconstruction of why you don't need to be afraid of public judgment, which is really what people are afraid of when they say they're afraid of public speaking.
Absolutely. All those eyes watching them. And yeah, it's that interesting fact of when we watch people, we marvel at what they're thinking, what they're saying, their expertise, but we view that if it was me up there, it's the opposite. Absolutely.
You just made the greatest point too, because if you sitting in an audience, and here I am watching Sean deliver on a talk on leadership, I'm there willingly, and I want to be informed, engaged, entertained. Nobody goes like, and right now, I want your audience to think about it right now. Did they tune in today thinking, man, I hope this episode sucks. I really hope Sean bombs this interview.
I'm looking for it, man.
I hope the guest is just atrocious, forgets everything he has to say, makes absolutely no clear point. In fact, there's like 1,000 other public speaker coaches out there. There's no way this guy has anything new to say on the topic. I will take nothing away from this. Nobody thinks that. Right. And yet that is the negative story that we tell ourselves that the audience is thinking when we get up on stage. And it's simply not the case. The audience is on your side. And if you have that platform, you are the expert. We don't ask second best to come on our shows, to come on our stages, to stand up in the boardroom. So if your boss has asked you to present Q3 sales statistics, it's because nobody else can do it better than you. And I think if people start to embrace that mindset that they are the expert, they are the authority for that bit, and that the audience is on their side, I think it really starts to ease some of that. And the great thing is if you can master this one skill set, it's ranked as one of the top soft skills for leadership. And it has a direct influence on your earning potential and your potential for getting a promotion within your work. I think it's a 10% boost in your ability to get a promotion and a 15% increase in your wage earning potential if you can master the skill set of public speaking.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't want to give up everything in the book because I want people to buy it, and I want people to bring you in to speak to their organizations about this concept. But give us a teaser. Give us one of those key tips to overcoming the fear of public judgment.
Well, so we started to address some of them, and that is to really understand that the audience is on your side. But one of the things that we go over in the book is a lot of the mental prep that goes into that. So, what does that specifically look like? And I have an entire chapter dedicated to preparation, how to properly mentally prepare. I will tell your audience this right now: they're probably preparing wrong. If you think the idea of prepping for a speech is to spend a week or two or a month memorizing word for word for word the thing that you're going to say, you are doing everybody in this scenario a disservice. You're doing yourself a disservice, you're doing your audience a disservice, and you're doing the person who asked you to be there a disservice. And we got to remember that those are the three bodies that are involved with that. And we need to address all of their needs, your needs, the promoter's needs, or your boss's needs, or whoever is giving you that platform, and the audience. All three need to be
Right.
considered. And so I show them how to properly prepare. And the biggest secret out of the book is that it is not memorizing a script. If you're memorizing a script, you are doing it wrong.
Mm. Absolutely. Yeah, I've talked to a lot of people about this through our executive coaching because it comes up a lot, the concept of executive presence and presentation. And I tell them that you have to be prepared enough to wing it.
Mm-hmm.
And in addition to that, people are always like, but I always get butterflies. I get butterflies, which is probably that fear of public judgment, right? Saying the wrong thing, messing up. And by the way, if you're trying to recall what you memorized, you'll mess up.
Yes.
It just doesn't work that way. But I heard this from somebody, I don't know who, I won't take credit for it, but you will always have butterflies when you speak publicly.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're prepared, they fly in formation.
I love that analogy. And it's true. It's true.
Yeah.
And the nice thing is if you are prepared, you know your material, and that's the key critical difference. You need to know what you're saying to the point where you can say it 1,000 times, 1,000 different ways, and still have the same message come across. I think Brian Tracy says it best: you're not an expert in something until you can use 20 words for each word that you're going to use.
Mm.
And I think it's an overcomplication of a simple concept, but that is, I need to be able to tell these. I have three basic stories that I tell in all of my presentations, right? Restaurant, when I remember the time that I got stage fright, because stage fright is real.
Yeah.
It's just that fear of public speaking is not real. And it's, as you pointed out, it's those butterflies getting out of control and turning to moths and eating your insides versus,
Exactly.
being beautiful and flying in formation. And then, I often tell the story of how I got to be public speaking, or usually I'm talking about a stunt that went really good. And those are, I'm going to tell those stories over and over and over and over again. But every time somebody comes and hears them, they hear them differently. I say them slightly differently. I'm informed by the audience and the conversation that we're having. So I think it's really important that people understand that prep work, being able to tell your story your way, is one of the key critical factors. And I do mean your story, because nobody knows your story better than you. You are the expert on your life. So I always tell people, no matter what you're talking about, what if it is Q3 sales statistics, tie it back to you. What is your reason why you care for this? Because if you can't impress to other people why you care about this, they won't care about this.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that, though. Preparation is necessary, but you can't overdo it. And that's where people mess up a lot. And honestly, listeners, just to let you in on something here, we're living this out today. So Tyler and I actually recorded an episode about 3 weeks ago. And technically, it was garbage just because of some glitches and things like that. So this is our second pass at it. And when we started today, we both agreed, let's not try to remember what we talked about. Let's just talk, right? Because if we try to remember what we talked about, it becomes mechanical, it becomes fake, and just doesn't take us anywhere.
No. And I'm so glad you use the phrase doesn't take us anywhere, because that's how I like to give people the analogy of any presentation you're giving. Your job is to take your audience on a journey. You need to take them from point A to point B. And when we memorize a script, we are locking our audience into one mode of transportation, taking one route. And that's all they get. So if there is a weather event like we're experiencing right now, and the flight gets canceled, you forget your script. You do not take your audience from A to B. Where do the proper prep work, where you're like, okay, this is the journey we need to get to. What are the possible ways we could get there? We could take the plane, we could take the car, we could take a trail ride on a horse, we could walk, we could hike, we could snowshoe, we could motorbike. What are the stops that potentially we could take? You know, if we're gonna do a walk, we're gonna need to refuel regularly, right?
Yeah.
And I show people that I can do the same presentation in 60 seconds that I can do in 5 days. And I know that because I have a 5-day workshop where people come to really hone in and master public speaking. The material there is the same material that you and I have discussed right here. And I can give people a snippet in a networking event in 60 seconds over the fear of overcoming the power of overcoming the fear of public speaking. And I can, boom, we can just drop that right now. It's the same journey, taking you A to B. It's just one, I'm putting us in the Concorde and we're going there at walk speed. And the other one is a meandering trail where we get to stop and look at some of the nature along the way. And I can explain to you more in depth. But if I lock us into the ticket and we're on United Flight 225 from Calgary to LA, flight goes mechanical, we don't go. And that's the problem with memorizing a script is it's locking you into these train tracks. And if Via Rail gets tipped, you're not going.
Yeah, it doesn't allow you to be audience centric. And as you were talking about that, one of the weird thoughts that popped in my head, you talked about the 1 hour version versus the 5-day version. The audience knows what they're there for too, right? So like they're not expecting 5-day depth in a 1 hour session. They're expecting an overview. They're going to probably leave. You've taken them on the journey but they know they're going to leave with questions because you only had an hour.
Yeah.
But if it's 5 days, they should be leaving saying, I get it 100%. I got no questions because we covered it, so relax on that because the audience has their thoughts too. So, well, man, we could go all day. For sake of time, we can't. But Tyler, you are aware that at the end of every episode of the Intentional Leader podcast, we ask the same question. We want that quick tip. So here's the question. What is something our listeners can do intentionally today to lead more effectively?
The best leaders are the vulnerable leaders, the ones who recognize that they don't know everything. But at the same time, they're the ones who know themselves the best. So I would strongly, strongly, strongly encourage everyone who is listening, no matter where you are in your leadership journey, to first of all, find the power in your own story. If you're afraid to tell people who the real you are, is, then you are holding yourself back as a leader. And when you can find the courage to step forward and say, this is who I am, this is what I believe in, and these are my convictions and why, that is when you will bring people onto your side. You may not impress everybody. There are going to be people who are like, I don't agree with you. That's a powerful thing to have as a leader too. Because if that's somebody that you need to bring onto your side, you can start to explore the rationale and the reasons why, and you can have a dialogue. Or, and in my case, I find that that's the quick way to separate out the people who you're not trying to lead. That it's not who you need to have on your team. And so I think it's really important that people find that story. And a quick little example of that, if you want to know it in real world that we can all understand, think of that time you were, and I've realized for some of us, this is going to be a long time ago, when you were in school and your teacher handed out the exam and everybody started working on it. And there was kind of this feeling in the room of unease, and you can feel it. It's palpable. And finally, one person puts their hand up and they say, teacher, question 16. I've done it 4 or 5 times. 2 plus 2, I'm pretty sure equals 4. But the options that we have here are 3, 5, 6, and 7. There is no 4 in my A, B, C, or D. I'm pretty sure 2 plus 2 is 4. What am I missing something? And the teacher looks and goes, oh, sorry. When I was doing this, I made a mistake. Yes. On my answer key, the correct answer is going to be B. I recognize 5 is not the correct answer. So either write in 4 or mark it B on your test. And either way, you're going to be right, even though I recognize that 5 is not the correct answer. And they say that, and then what happens to the whole rest of the room? Everybody goes, oh yeah, I was worried about that. I was just going to skip it. I didn't know. Oh, I just put down whatever. And then you have the one person who's like, 4 plus 4 isn't 5. But
exactly. I thought that was, yeah.
Either way, the whole class went, oh, but it was the person who had the bravery to say that they didn't understand, or they had the question, or they wanted to do it. It was the person who spoke up first that was the leader. Everybody turned to them and went, thank you. And they weren't any smarter than anybody else in the room. They didn't have any skill set better than anyone else in the room. The only thing that differentiated them was they had the bravery to speak up. So if you want to be a leader, you've got to find the bravery to speak up and say who you are and embrace that. And when you can do that, your leadership potential is exponential.
Great challenge, listeners. I hope you take him up on that. Tyler, I appreciate that. It's great to have you on the show today. Listeners, in the show notes, you'll find where you can buy his book or book him to speak, or even tap into his company for safety, Total Buy-In. Tyler, great to see you. Thanks for all you do, and we'll chat again sometime soon.
Thanks for having me on, Sean. I appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Intentional Leader Podcast presented by Reenergize Professional Coaching. Be sure to see the show notes for links to Reenergize Professional Coaching and links to contact our guests. Now, hit that subscribe button so that you are alerted with every new episode of the Intentional Leader Podcast.